What sort of movies did you like as a kid growing up?
You might be able to tell I was a big monster fan. I grew up watching like all the old Universal horror movies and Japanese monster movies and pretty much any kind of monster movie. That was my genre. My parents said I used to watch those movies before I could even walk and talk. So and they were lucky enough to sort of be on TV at the time before like music videos came into play. You could see them quite often on television.
And also, at one time, I think I had read the Ray Harryhausen stuff with stop motion, right?
Yeah, Ray Harryhausen. I mean, I think I knew his name before I knew any like director or actor names. So, he definitely, his movies had a big impact. And I think that he was probably the person that got me more interested in animation than, any other kind of form of animation.
Your childhood was not, happy-go-lucky necessarily, and I just wonder if you would characterize in some way how it may have shaped the sorts of things that you've made films about later on.
Well, I think pretty much, I don't think I had that unusual. I think pretty much every kid would kind of say the same kind of thing. You feel kind of different and isolated, and you don't feel like you fit into your surroundings and society. But I guess if you probably ask any kid in this classroom, they probably say they felt the same way. So, but yeah, I think at the specific time that I grew up in sort of suburbia, I did feel different, and it was strange. I found it quite strange. It's just because you like monster movies. People thought you were weird, which I always felt was an odd thing, because it's like, well, if I liked musicals or westerns, would people think you're weird, And right. So it didn't seem that unnatural to me. But it was quite interesting how quickly you get sort of categorized as a child, and I saw that with other kids. You're good at this, you're bad at that, and you sort of, the kids kind of got separated into different categories. And so I think I've always been aware of that, and I think that's why I like movies like Frankenstein, where you look at the character and he's perceived as a monster, even though he isn't really. He's just different. And the angry villagers, it was easy to sort of identify that with your neighbors, and the sort of mad scientist. I always wanted to be a mad scientist. So all those kind of things made it easy to identify with those kind of movies.
It seems like one of your great outlets as a kid, and still was drawing and remains drawing, and artistic creativity. And when did you first sort of experiment with drawing, and when was the first time somebody told you that you were talented at it?
Well, I don't know if anybody ever really did. I think it felt quite natural. It felt like, every kid liked to draw, I mean, you look at kids' drawings, I go to my kids' school and I see all their kids' drawings. They're all great, they're all interesting, and you can see the joy of it, the fun of it, and I think that most children enjoy that as I did. And I think as you get older, certain teachers say that, well, no, you're not good at this, or you should draw like that, and I think I remember at one point getting frustrated with that and just deciding, well, forget, I'm just going to draw the way I wanted to draw and not worry so much about what other people thought of it, and just enjoyed doing it as a thing. So I was lucky enough to just kind of break through all that and just not worry so much about my ability, and just go with the enjoyment value of it. And I had a couple of teachers that were quite supportive that way, and just sort of letting you be who you were.
Right.
And so I think that was more of the issue than I had a couple of teachers that were supportive, I'd say.
So how, after high school, did you wind up at Cal Arts, and then what was the experience like there? Because so many talented people seem to have passed through there.
Well, I think I was a bit lucky, because at the time they just started that sort of Disney animation program. So, it was an expensive school, which I couldn't afford. And I think being a new program, they were giving away scholarships at the time. And so I think I was lucky to be a part of that first couple of years where they might have been a little bit more free to giving scholarships, because it was a new program. So I was lucky in a way to get that. And, I think, again, because it was a new thing, it kind of attracted a different, group of people that wouldn't ordinarily have that kind of outlet for things. So I think in some cases it was being, there at the right time.
When you came out, I guess at just 20, you started at Disney, and it just seems to me that for somebody who grew up in Burbank and was interested in drawing and, liked movies, that must have felt like the top of the mountain, did it?
Well, yeah, it's strange because Burbank. You could say Burbank. There's Disney is there, Warner Brothers is there, Universal is not far away, but yet growing up in the environment of Burbank, you could be a million miles away. It's not like it's like everybody there is in the movie business or whatever. So it even though it was close, it felt a million miles away. But at the same time, it was incredible. And I mean, after the first couple of first year of college, you kind of knew that it was more like a recruiting station than it was necessarily a college, in the sense that I think the whole reason the program was started was to try to develop people to do animation. So it became pretty clear pretty soon. And at the same time, for me, I didn't go the whole 4 years. I ended up leaving after a couple of years, to go work at Disney, which, seemed much more important to me at the time than getting a degree.
Yeah. So my sense of your experience at Disney came to be very frustrating. Is that correct?
Well, part of it is I wasn't very good at their style of animation. I think that was the key. And the films they were making there weren't, it wasn't the golden years of Disney animation. What I mean? It was kind of the probably some might consider the darker days in the history of the studio. But I think that also, even though I wasn't good at it, and they recognized that after a while, I got the opportunity to just draw and do different things, which was a great, it was kind of unheard of. I got to sit in a room for a year, just draw things for Black Cauldron, whatever I wanted to draw, and then once that didn't pan out, I got to draw things for other projects, and none of which really panned out, but then that gave me the opportunity to do Vincent and then Frankenweenie. So I was, even though it was a strange time in the company's history, I got a lot of interesting, strange opportunities to just explore things.
And I guess really without that period, if you guys had just parted ways instead of you having that time, one might argue Frankenweenie would not have happened, which means that Pee-wee wouldn't have happened, which means
it was a very bizarre. I got the opportunity to do Vincent, which then got me the opportunity to do Frankenweenie. At the same time, it was a time when I developed like Nightmare Before Christmas. So there was a lot of things. There was a lot of things that were happening then that were very important to me, and to be sort of left in a weird vacuum was great for me. Even though like slightly frustrating, it was still amazing.
So what were the steps how Frankenweenie led to Pee-wee?
Well, as a short film, it never got released, as did Vincent, and Disney, they didn't really know what to do with me, but luckily, since those films got made, people at Warner Brothers and I think Paul Rubens and the producers and people at Warner Brothers saw those, and basically, even though they weren't released, it showed them something from me, and therefore I got that job quite, strangely easily, based on those films. So that was great. They seemed to see something right away, which was great. Your
first three movies, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, and Batman, were all made when you were still in your 20s, which seems pretty amazing, first of all, but also that they were made at all as sort of unconventional, not run-of-the-mill studio movies, and did so well. I mean, I guess the question that I have is, you had no point of reference, right? You thought that's the way it worked?
Well, yeah, I didn't really have a point of reference, and also it was interesting, and I think it ultimately kind of kept me balanced because, I realized like Pee-wee wasn't an ordinarily like a studio movie, and nor was Beetlejuice, or at the time really was Batman, and Pee-wee and Beetlejuice, they didn't cost a lot, and they did pretty well, but they were also really horribly reviewed. I mean, they were like on the 10 worst movies of the year lists, and so it was, that sort of taught me the weirdness of the whole thing, and that you know, it kind of weirdly balanced me out, because I certainly did get very egotistical about it, because it was such a strange, phenomenon, all of them. And so, from the very beginning, I knew how strange and sort of bizarre the whole situation was, and continues to be.
Right. And I guess, how much did you / do you care about the way the movie is received after you're done with it, by critics, by the public? Are you able to separate yourself emotionally from how others feel, or does it affect you?
Well, I think it always affects you. I mean, like I said, I learned early on, movies like Pee-wee and just got horrible reviews, and then a few years later, people were saying those are the best movies I've made, which was frightening. It's like, well, I'm in real trouble now if that's,
Right.
And Batman wasn't received very well. It was received well publicly. Mm-hmm. Then I've had movies that were, critically well received that didn't make any money, movies that were terribly critically received and made lots of money, So there's never been a real consistency in terms of how things are perceived. Right. With me. And Batman was too dark. Now it's it's like almost a light comedy compared to things. So you don't. It's hard to you do sort of take it personally, but it's hard to take too personally because of all the strange conflicting elements that go into it. Nightmare wasn't received very well at the beginning, and it's over the years has been better received. So it's always been a strange thing, and it's hard to kind of understand on a logical level.
I guess a related question would be that those first 3 features did so well commercially that I would think that it might make it easier for you to then go and make the less conventional personal projects that you would want to do, something like an Edward Scissorhands or an Ed Wood.
Well, I thought it would be, but then I remember Edward Scissorhands. I thought after Batman, I thought, okay, now I can do something, and Edward Scissorhands was one of the hardest movies to get made as well. So it's. Each one it's funny, and because people have asked over the years, it's like, you can do whatever you want. It's like, well, no, you can't really do whatever you want. And also once you get sort of categorized, even though I was lucky enough to have success, there's something about me, I don't know what it is in my that makes them worry about me in some way or level. I've always been responsible and tried to be responsible for budget and stuff, but I don't know. I guess that's just the nature of filmmaker versus this and the studio. There's some sort of different species of characters or whatever. But no, I learned that early on, that it was, because I thought the same thing, but
not the case.
Not really the case.
But I guess, is it extra gratifying though, in spite of that, when you can plow through and still get a very personal movie like Edward Scissorhands or Ed Wood? I gather they're pretty personal.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, you feel. I mean, fair. You feel that almost on any movie. You kind of go and you never really know. I mean, I've had a couple movies, I worked on for a year, and they'd go down or whatever, and so you don't really forget. And I think what happens is that then you just feel kind of. You're making the movie like when you're on the set making it. That's when it's really happening. So it's kind of like, oh, wow. And so each one does feel like an achievement,
right,
to get to that spot. But even with Pee-wee, or Beetlejuice, there were things based on other things, but you always treated them personally. So, for me, they were as personal as in Edward Scissorhands or whatever. But yeah, I mean, things like Scissorhands or Ed Wood or Frankenweenie, those are films that are definitely probably hit a deeper chord with me than some, I guess.
So many people say they can look at a movie and from the look of it say, that's a Tim Burton movie. And, even this word Burton-esque, where people use it to label, what do you think they mean when they say that? And do you like it or not like it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I never really tried to analyze because you spend your whole life trying to become a person, and and not a thing, and then it becomes a thing, and so it's a little alarming. And then you see kind of things that it kind of looks like a movie that you would have done, and it just feels a bit, I don't know, it feels a little bit of soul sucking. I feel a bit disturbed a little bit, but it's like, I don't know, I've never tried to analyze because I've never like thought after a certain amount of that, you don't try to go, oh well, this is what I do, or this is going to be successful, or this is aimed at kids or adults or teenage. It's like I never really tried to go there. It's like things like, well, like Nightmare's too scary for kids, and then kids love it, and so there's always been contradictions. Right. Batman's too dark. Oh no, Batman Returns is even worse. No, some people say it was lighter. Some people say it was darker. Well, how can something be lighter and dark? Or dark? So I get confused by the sort of people's reactions to things. Mainly kids are usually pretty cool. It may take a while for a film to break through, but usually they're pretty cool about getting what you're trying to do with it, and understanding something. So I try not to I could try to be responsible and do what I want to do, but not analyze myself too much that way.
Very visual, sort of a dark comedy elements, a lot of attention to death. Can you answer to yourself why that might be? Are these things that generally fascinate you in your own life, or is it just the way it's worked out?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess, growing up watching monster movies, I mean, that obviously that theme is pretty much an issue in films like those films. I think that I would say I was obsessed by death, but I would say, I guess growing up in a kind of society where, it's a taboo subject, and say, for instance, living in Los Angeles, being close to the Hispanic culture, where like Day of the Dead is much more, death is treated much more of a as part of life, and much more in a sort of with humor and color, and sort of taking a negative subject and looking at it on a not sort of positive, but more is part of life and part of the world. Never took a. I never felt like I had it was a morbid fascination with it. Just more part of because like when I watch monster movies, I get a sense of joy. I never got a sense of feeling like weird or dark. And so I think those kind of films made me feel somewhat more optimistic about things for some reason.
Mm-hmm. I have heard that it was the Museum of Modern Art exhibit of some of your early artwork that sort of sparked the desire to revisit Frankenweenie. Is that true?
Yeah, that's probably true, because I never looked at, all the drawing stuff stuck in a drawer, and when they came to me, I just sort of let the curators kind of come in and go through the drawers and everything, and it wasn't until then I started to look at things that I'd done in the past, and I think the thing about looking at the original drawings and then loving stop motion, it just seemed like a good medium for the material and trying to get closer to the drawings, and it just seemed like a pure version, and then sort of expanding on those memories and like remembering the certain kind of kids in the school and teachers and the other kind of monster movies. So I think all that kind of stuff together made it feel like a different project. I never had the thought like, oh, I want to remake this thing or whatever. It just felt like, a whole new thing, and the medium sort of taking an inanimate object and bringing it to life sort of mirrored the story, and so it just felt like a more powerful, pure version of it.
And life's kind of funny, isn't it, that the studio that originally didn't know what to do with it is now the place that's sort of put it back out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of a twisted humor about it, I guess.
Well, you had joked, I think, in another interview that I've been hired and fired by Disney 3 different times. I'm used to it.
Well, let's make it 4. 4? Let's go for an even dozen. Who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess based on the fact that you use stop motion for Frankenweenie, the original, and Corpse Bride, and New Frankenweenie and I guess others. Is it fair to conclude that you like that more, or you think it's better than just sort of conventional or hand-drawn animation?
No, I think all forms are great. I mean, I've used computers and things, and I just come from hand-drawn animation. I mean, I think it's a form that I do love because there's something that's very tactile about it. It's like there's a set and the lights. Characters are going in and out of shadows. You see that. There's something. It's why I loved Ray Harryhausen's work. You can feel hands on it. You can feel. There's an energy to it, and I some things are better computer, some things are better drawn, and I think some things are good in stop motion. I think you just try to pick the right medium with the right project, and the projects I've picked, Nightmare or Corpse Bride, they felt like stop motion animated films to me. Right. So those are the films that I felt were best in that particular medium.
Victor, the most common descriptions of the character: lonely, isolated, maybe a little depressed, has a dog that he loves, spends time in graveyards. All of these things you yourself, I believe, have done. And with many of the characters that have been sort of the protagonists of your films, you felt personally connected to them. Is that something that is necessary for you to make a film, or is it just coincidental?
No, I would say it's coincidental. I mean, even films where I, have been based on other things. You always, for me, I like to feel the character because I certainly many years ago was much more nonverbal, and so for me to try to relate to whatever a crew or an actor or something, it's important for me to feel it so I can at least try to impart some emotional clarity to it. Because if I don't have it, it's hard to kind of relate it to somebody else. So, and also too, you're spending a lot of time, a year or two, a couple of years on a film. It's important to feel like you live and understand the character. So yeah, for me, it's an important part of it. And even in things like secondary characters, in films, it's something I always try to understand an aspect of it and feel it, because for me, it's the only way I can live with it, be inspired by it, and try to relate to other people.
You've worked a lot of times with Johnny Depp, you've worked a lot of times with Danny Elfman, your girlfriend, and with others as well. And I just wonder, how did you first cross paths with those three, and why is it that you sort of bring out some of the best work in each other? And in the case of Danny Elfman, I guess it is directly relevant to, the recent stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It was my first feature, his sort of first. So, I think we just connected. I used to go see his band or playing in nightclubs, before I was just a student and stuff. So I even before I was into movies, this music sounded, movie-like. So there was just a connection there, just because I think we related to the same things and kind of came through the whole thing at the same time in a way. And with Johnny, it's the same kind of thing. It's like I just meeting him, he seemed like the character of Edward Scissorhands. It was like quite just a simple connection that way. And Helena was a different story, because I didn't really know her work very well, but I did think of her, strangely enough, as an ape, and I didn't even know who she was really. But I like working with people that I worked with before, and I like, on a film you can never always do that, and I think it's fun and it's healthy to kind of mix it up. I like, with the characters, it's fun to work with people that you've worked with to see what different thing they do. That's kind of an artistic challenge and fun thing to see them change characters from one film to another. And Danny sort of grow and become character too with the music. But it's also fun to, I've had the joy of working with new people, and you mix it up and mix up the chemistry, and sometimes you do that just out of necessity, because you never know when you're going to do a film, people working and this and that, and so I enjoy both. I've met some great people, even. Every film you do, you meet new people that go, wow, I'd like to work with them again. And so, it's constantly evolving, but it is fun to see the people you've worked with kind of reinvent themselves and change from film to film.
People have made it seem like Frankenweenie, you know, it's very much darker than your average kid's movie. But I mean, if you've seen Bambi, if you've seen Dumbo,
That's what I keep saying.
Yeah.
I've said that. I said, you know, that's the most amazing thing to me, and I've had this my whole career. You know, it's like, you know, as you say, have you seen any Disney movie from Snow White on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Lion King. There's a huge specter of death that hangs over that film. You know, Bambi. You know, I remember watching not long ago. 101 Dalmatians. She's talking about batting them over the head and drowning them, and yeah, I mean, it's like they wouldn't be Disney movies,
Right.
and I'm just fascinated. And you know, just talk to kids. There's a layer of things with adults that they just forget what it's like to be kids. I mean, I remember Nightmare was way too scary. This and that. And little kids loved it.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same with Frankenweenie. I mean, I once it gets past this sort of fear factor. Most kids are fine, and
it's
it's
not
really
even
very
shown.
lighthearted. No, I mean it's like it's extremely, in my mind, it's one of the safer movies I've ever done, and so I've always been fascinated by that dynamic. You know, I can't quite. I just think some certain adults kind of lose that sort of memory of those feelings of when you're little.
Well, and it was very interesting to read where you had told another interviewer, quote, "I don't think of kids or adults. What's child, what's adult? Everybody is everything. It has more to do with a feeling." And, you know, are these just artificial distinctions that we make? Or?
Well, I mean, there's physical,
Right.
you know, when you're a child, you're a child. But I mean, I remember when I was really young, I felt like I was about 80 years old, you know, and I do think there's a strange reversal. I think as you get older, sometimes you sort of, you regress in certain ways. So I think there's lots of different dynamics that go on with everybody, you know, to different degrees. But you know, I felt quite sophisticated when I was little. You know, like I'm watching monster movies. Now monster movies aren't for everybody, but I was fine. I didn't have any problem with it, and also too, you know, a lot of your inspiration happens when you're young. You know, you know, and you see like great artists. I remember seeing a Manet retrospective. You know, you could see in the whole body of work, it's like it looked like he was searching his whole life to kind of go back and find the simplicity that he had very early on. So, you know, I think that's a fairly common artistic goal, is to kind of keep searching for that kind of sort of purity and spark that you have, you know, early in life.
If you were to do sort of the state of the union, the state of Tim Burton today, early in your career you had talked about that you felt more comfortable with images than with dialogue. You know, what's your outlook on those sorts of things, and do you feel that that's still the dynamic?
Well, I mean, I like actors who, you know, that project things without dialogue or between the lines. I've always liked that. But at the same time, you know, I loved Ed Wood, and the guy never shuts his mouth, you know. And so it depends on what's being said and what the context of it is. And, you know, in terms of adaptations versus, you know, I mean, everything, I don't think too much about it, because, like, you know, like Sweeney Todd, for instance, I mean, yeah, it's based on a music, but it's not necessarily based, I mean, it's not like something, you know, that's like a safe, you know, it's a serial killer, it's, you know, people singing the whole time, people that never sang before, you know, R-rated musical. You know, it's not like something that's like, okay, yeah, I'm just doing an adaptation of
This
something.
again.
Here's
Right.
another safe bet, you know, whatever. You know, and then even like things like Alice, you know, it's like I look back on you know, other versions. It's not like, you know, it's not like there's been a history of successful Alice in Wonderland movies, you know, and so it's not like something where I felt like, oh, I'm just trying to sort of coast on some kind of adaptation or what, or even Charlie the Chocolate Factory. That's because I liked Roald Dahl, you know. I mean, so I kind of, you know, I don't really know what's in the future. I have no real plan at the moment, but you know, there's things that I'd like to do that, you know, are maybe, you know, maybe not based on something specific, and then there's probably a few things that might be based on a book or something or whatever. You know, I don't have any real, it's more just about what, you know, get inspired by at the time, and so I just sort of leave it at that, and just see what emotionally, you know, resonates.